Today I'm out near Park City, Utah for one of the most important product launches in Cadillac's long history. This is the all-new Cadillac Lyriq. A lot is riding on this model, not just because Cadillac has said that their future is all electric, and this really gives us an idea of what that future is going to look like, but because General Motors more broadly has said their future is all electric, and again, this gives us a window into that electric future. So it's a pretty good thing that I think this is the best Cadillac that they've ever built. Now, that doesn't mean that Cadillac got everything perfect with the new Lyriq. There are still a few flaws here and there, but let's talk about why you might want the Lyriq and why you might want something else. If you haven't already done so, be sure and subscribe to the EV Buyer's Guide channel. There's a link down there in the description section. In that video, I take an even deeper dive into the Cadillac Lyriq. I'm going to talk more about comparisons in that video, the electrical architecture, and how it compares to other EVs on the market. This video is going to be a little bit shorter and a little bit more high level. I'm still trying to figure out how exactly to differentiate these two channels, but still deliver some of the folks over here at Alex and Autos some EV content like this Lyriq, because it's really important for the Cadillac brand and to understand the direction that Cadillac is moving in. As you approach the new Lyriq, the first thing you're going to notice is this very distinctive front end. It's instantly recognizable as a Cadillac, yet still distinctly modern. They decided to give it sort of a grille motif, I guess you could say. This is more of a shield, I guess, because no cooling happens here. All the cooling is just down there at the very bottom of the bumper. But instead of just making this a blank face theme or just an imitation grille, they've added light modules inside this grille. And what's really unique about this is that each of these lines that you see on the outside, sort of this smiley face portion of this shield, can be lit independently of one another. And that gives us a really interesting light show as you approach the vehicle at night. The light show starts in the center of the shield. I'll roll a clip here that I was able to capture at night. It broadens the smile out, I guess you could say, and then interacts with the turn signals that are progressive turn signals. They're positioned between the bumper section and the hood. From that point on, the daytime running lights and the headlights start illuminating in sort of a cascade waterfall style fashion that's really distinctive and honestly pretty darn cool. I also love the fact that these LED headlight modules are so incredibly slim and just really shockingly vertical. This is very unlike any other EV out on the market right now, or any other Cadillac, to be perfectly honest. It's difficult to see on camera, but even during the day in person, you can notice that these sections are illuminated. Now, the upper stripes right here that go towards the Cadillac logo, those are not illuminated during the day, but Cadillac has said that the grille is going to change, or I guess you could say this shield is going to change from trim level to trim level, and likely from model to model as well. Dimensionally, the Lyriq is pretty similar to the BMW X5 and the Mercedes-Benz GLE. I'm talking about length and width. But roofline height, it's definitely a little bit lower to the ground, giving this a bit more of a sporty wagon vibe, I guess you could say. But it has the high belt line and ground clearance that you'd expect in a luxury crossover. And it also has the long hood profile that you might expect in a luxury crossover. And in that respect, this reminds me a great deal of the first generation Cadillac SRX, a vehicle that honestly I had a bit of a soft spot for. I like the long hood profile, but it does mean that the packaging of the vehicle ends up a little bit less space efficient than some of the modern crop of EVs that have a really truncated front end. Love it or hate it, the Lyriq was designed to make a bold statement, and bold it certainly is out back. I love the front end design. I find the back end design to be a hair busy at times, but it has been growing on me over the last 2 days. We have progressive turn signals back here like we saw up front, but they are truly enormous. Not quite as big as the ones on the Escalade, but they span from right about here at the beginning of the hatch all the way down the side and then wrap around to the rear right there by that Cadillac logo. The upper section is a little bit difficult to see during the daytime, but at night it is definitely very distinctive. I think the Cadillac missed an opportunity by not making this stripe amber. I think that would have been a little bit more distinctive. The brake lights are down here on these very vertical light modules, and then the third brake light is right there in the middle, right in the middle of this large upper wing. As with other modern EVs, you can get your Lyriq with one motor or with two. The single motor model has the motor in the back, and it gives you 340 horsepower total. If you get the dual motor model, then you get 500 horsepower total, but they haven't given us an official torque figure on that model just yet. The battery pack is going to be the same. It's a 102 kilowatt hour unit, giving this model 312 miles of range. We don't have official range figures for the all-wheel drive model yet, but I expect that's probably going to be somewhere around 270 to 280 miles. As always, charge times will vary based on the kind of power you have available, but if you can feed the onboard charger at its maximum rate, the rear-wheel drive model will charge in as little as 5.5 hours from completely empty, and if you're DC fast charging, you can get about 76 miles of range in just 10 minutes. No EV would be complete without aerodynamic door handles, so let's go over the ones in the Lyriq. This is just a button. It is a physical button. You can see it moves right there, and then you open the door on the front with this little pull tab. This is vaguely reminiscent of what we see in the Mustang Mach-E for the same aerodynamic reason. In the back, we find the same button, but no vestigial handle on top. Instead, basically the same thing as the Mach-E again, we have a little rubber section right here on the back of the door, so you grab the door itself. To open the hatch, we press the Cadillac logo. And to open the hood, we have a double pull lever since there's no storage up front. Sorry about the dashboard chime going off. I couldn't find a way to turn it off, but still keep the cabin cool while I was filming. Front seat comfort was exceptional over a day in this Cadillac. That's long been something that we've seen from Cadillac in their crossovers and SUVs for a while. And the front seats are a little bit wider than I had expected. That was made possible by moving the seat controls over to the front doors. Rather than having to grab down here on the side of the seat, they were able to make the cushion a little bit wider and make the door storage pockets wider as well. In addition to the multi-way powered driver's seat with 4-way lumbar, we have a powered tilt telescopic memory-linked steering wheel and front seat massage for the driver and front passenger. At least for the moment, the Lyriq is going to come only one way, basically fully loaded. At the moment, that means that all models have this large panoramic moonroof, but it is closable with the shade, and I still have a reasonable amount of headroom here. With my head all the way back to this headrest, I have about 3.5 inches left. Jumping into the back seat, the Lyriq definitely has a big and spacious feel. The back seat is certainly wider across the back than something like the Genesis GV60, but we get about the same kind of combined legroom, 81 inches front row plus second row. Although I wouldn't be surprised if GM's legroom numbers maybe get revised a little bit later, because this certainly feels roomier than the GV60. The distance between my bottom right here on the seat back cushion and that dashboard, that's a really long distance, but I think it's just because the Lyriq is more relaxed, more reclined in its seating position, so a little bit more like perhaps a classic Cadillac than you might expect. It's not as upright as an Escalade or an XT4 or XT5, and I kind of like that vibe. We have a nearly flat load floor in this vehicle. Moving over to the middle of the rear bench, you'll definitely notice the extra width versus something like the Genesis GV60. Headroom is a little bit lower than I had expected. If I put my head back to the headrest, my hair is just barely brushing the ceiling, but headroom's still fairly generous. Not quite as much as you'd find in something like a BMW X5, of course. Moving all the way over to the right side, this front seat's all the way back in its tracks. You can see I still have about 1.5 inches of legroom left. The rear seats do offer a little bit of recline. There is a lever right here. You can put them in a more upright position for extra cargo practicality, or a little bit of recline, about 3/4 inch of motion. But if you do that, then my head does touch the ceiling. Rear seat passengers get air vents in the center console. They've said that there may be a 3-zone climate control coming soon with controls in that little blank space. We have USB-C charge ports, a 120-volt power inverter. You can see that nearly flat floor there. And the ISOFIX or latch anchors right here, these are a little bit on the large side, and you will notice them sitting in the back seat. I also wouldn't be surprised if I saw a revision of the cargo area numbers in the Lyriq, because this cargo area seems more spacious than the one that we find in the EV6 or the GV60 or the Ioniq 5. But on the sheet, it's 28 cubic feet, so pretty similar to most EVs out there. This does again feel a little bit bigger, however, and there's plenty of room for roller luggage. It's possible that Cadillac may be using a different standard for measuring cargo capacity, because there's also a cargo well right there under the load floor and a place to store the roller cargo cover. If you want to know about the interior of the Lyriq in great detail, there is a separate video on the channel where I take a deep dive into the various components in here, because this is an all-new interior for Cadillac, including lots of new interior components like a new steering wheel, new shifters, etc. But the big feature in here is this approximately 33-inch curved LCD in the dashboard. I mistakenly said it was an OLED display. Apparently Cadillac has clarified, and they have said that it is a close bonded LCD, not an OLED. But again, if you want to know more about that, be sure and check out that video. Bearing in mind that the instrument cluster software is not quite complete in this particular pre-production trim, it is adjustable via the options over here on this touchscreen side, so I can choose between 3 different layouts, or I guess 4 different layouts actually right there. So there's a full map view based on the same Google mapping interface as the infotainment system. There's also a clean view, but personally I prefer the energy view. We also, on this little touchscreen over here on this side, get features like the trip computer readouts, and then of course headlight controls as well. To free up space in the center console, Cadillac has gone back to a column-mounted shifter. So you pull towards the driver and then push up for reverse, pull towards the driver and then down for drive. You can see they're illuminated. And then park is this button right over here on the end of the stalk. As is the 3-spoke steering wheel with capacitive controls. You'll notice the eye monitor right there just behind the steering wheel. That's for the Supercruise system that is standard on this vehicle, although the software is not going to be available right at launch. So if you do get your Lyriq in 2022, the software to enable Supercruise, that's coming a little bit later. Now, the capacitive controls do not respond if you're just casually running your finger over. You have to have a definite dedicated press to them, and then there's haptic feedback so you know what you're doing. On the left side of the wheel, we have controls for the infotainment system, as well as this little toggle that allows you to change tracks, change sources, etc. And then on the left side, we have the controls for the standard radar adaptive cruise control system, and of course, the button to enable and disable Supercruise. To the left of the steering wheel, we have some more unique buttons: the electric parking brake, lane keeping assistance, auto brake hold, and then the dimmer. And then, of course, as expected, unique window switches and mirror controls. Starting out on this gravel road, the first thing you're going to notice about the Lyriq is the ride quality. This is very, very different from a Tesla Model 3 or a Tesla Model Y. In terms of ride quality, this is more similar to the expensive Teslas in the United States, the Model S and the Model X. Now, interestingly, Cadillac chose not to give the Lyriq an adaptive suspension system. I wouldn't be surprised if that came a little bit later, but they did give this a multi-link, basically an almost double wishbone suspension up front and a 5-link suspension in the rear. So the suspension motions are very well controlled, and you'll really notice that out here on rough pavement or washboard pavement in the corners, that the suspension never becomes upset. This always has an exceptional level of poise, I have to say. This comes across as you might think a modern Cadillac should, and rides very differently than XT4 and XT5, which I find a little bit on the firm side, and definitely more composed than the Cadillac Escalade. This might actually be the best riding Cadillac crossover. The extra curb weight in the Lyriq is certainly noticeable. This has a larger, heavier feel out on the road that personally I like, but you will notice that acceleration times and braking distances are going to be faster and shorter respectively in some of the lighter weight competition, most notably that Genesis GV60. It is pretty darn swift. It won't go as far as this on a charge. Its battery is smaller, but it is significantly lighter than this. The BMW iX also has some impressive numbers, but it's quite a lot more expensive than this. It's made of carbon fiber that really helps its curb weight profile, but it also means that it's about $40,000 more than this Cadillac Lyriq. So I think the Cadillac really hit the right balance with this model. Now, in terms of my preliminary 0 to 60 numbers, this model managed 6.0 seconds 0 to 60, so definitely slower than some of those competitors, even though we have a bit more horsepower out of the electric motor. That simply has to do with the curb weight. I was not able to do any 60 to 0 braking testing, but I suspect this is probably going to be around 118 to 120 feet or so, probably a little bit longer than some of those lighter weight competitors. Although Cadillac does give this really wide tires. 265 width tires are standard, 275 width tires are optional. This one has the wider tire package on it, and the lower profile tires. And those low profile tires, they really aren't a problem. The ride quality is still pretty darn good. The Lyriq really comes across as the ultimate highway cruiser. The ride is smooth and the ride is serene. This cabin is very, very quiet. Again, the car was on this entire time, and you could hear that the HVAC system wasn't making much noise outside. It's not really making much noise inside, although a bit more noise is generally picked up by these mics than you'll really hear in person. I would not be surprised if this was one of the quietest cabins that we've ever tested once I get this back at home. Road noise and wind noise are incredibly well controlled, and you don't get the sort of rumble that you sometimes can in EVs. Also, you don't really get any electric motor whine in here, which is certainly something that you can get in pretty much every other modern EV out there. You'll get at least some of it. Now, there is some fake noise piped in here if you want to. If I put this in tour mode and then floor it, then you get some imitation noise piped in through the speaker systems, but the motors themselves are very, very quiet. When it comes to handling, you're certainly going to notice the added heft in the Lyriq, but Cadillac has done an excellent job tuning the suspension. As you might expect in a modern electric vehicle, this has a near perfect 50-50 weight balance, and although they weren't overly specific about the rear-wheel drive model, I suspect this might actually be just a tiny bit lighter up front than in the rear, just as you find in, say, a rear-wheel drive BMW 3 Series, or interestingly, a rear-wheel drive Cadillac as well. That leads to an excellent steering feel out on your favorite winding mountain road. Now, I wasn't able to film any of that, but I was able to spend a little bit of time out on some windier roads out here in Utah. It definitely has a good feel to it, but it also feels a little bit on the heavy side. The suspension does not get upset over broken pavement or sections of pavement where there's gravel or sand on the road. It has a really good composure to it, but it's not going to cut that corner as tightly as something that's a little bit lighter, or something that's dual motor, because you might be able to get that front motor to help you around the corner in some situations. This is always going to have a strong rear power bias, because in this model, that's the only place where the power happens. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do much as far as efficiency testing out here in Park City because I've been doing a lot of mountain climbing and mountain pass driving, but over the day I have been averaging 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which is significantly better than I had honestly expected in this vehicle. That puts the real-world range figure, at least out here so far in Park City, at around 300 miles of real-world range. If you lived in an area with level road surfaces where you're perhaps going a little bit slower or not spending as much time idling with the air conditioning on, then you would probably be getting closer to that 312 miles of range. Even now, with the battery just barely over 50%, the range guessometer is guessing about 173 miles. That sounds pretty plausible. At least for the moment, summing up the Lyriq is pretty easy. If you're looking for an EV that's a bit more relaxed, more luxurious, a little bit more polished in terms of its ride quality, that's why you might want to consider the Lyriq. The seating position is a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more Cadillac sedan-like, whereas the ride height of the vehicle is a little bit more Cadillac crossover-like, perhaps along the lines of the XT5. The result is that I feel a little bit lower in here with a slightly higher sill height than you'd expect in an XT5, but definitely higher off the ground than you'd find in a CT4 or CT5. Whether or not that's a pro or con will really depend on what you're looking for in your next EV. I've always been partial to big luxury sedans, and the Lyriq definitely has a bit of that large luxury sedan vibe going on here, but some of the higher height nature that some people want in a modern crossover. So perhaps this is one of the truer crossovers out there in terms of that blend of different driving positions. Also, if you're looking for an EV with actual hands-free driving capability, this is going to be the absolute best out there. Now, full disclosure, I have not been able to drive Supercruise with this particular model. It's not enabled yet, the software is not ready, but I have Supercruised in every other General Motors product that it's available in, and this is going to get the absolute latest version of Supercruise. What's unique about Supercruise is that it's an eyes on the road, hands off the steering wheel assist system. So definitely different than autopilot or most of the other luxury systems that we see out there, where you're supposed to still have your hands on the steering wheel at all times, even though, yes, you can take your hands off for a short while. They're designed for your hands on the wheel. This is designed for your hands to be off the steering wheel. Now, that is similar to what we find in the Ford Mustang Mach-E, but let's be honest, Supercruise is definitely more advanced than the Blue Cruise system. Not only will this change lanes for you, it will actually seek out that lane change, complete the lane change with your hands still off the steering wheel, but it also is better at telling the driver what's going on with this light bar on the top of the steering wheel. That's really the best feature of Supercruise. You can tell what the system is doing. It's more aggressive and smoother at staying in the lane line. It's just a better system, generally speaking. On the other hand, if you're looking for the most dynamic, sportiest EV, that's not necessarily going to be the Lyriq at this moment, but who knows? It could be the Lyriq in the future. Now for some good news and some bad news. Cadillac has priced the Lyriq very aggressively. In fact, surprisingly aggressively. For 2023, which is the launch year for this EV, it starts just under $60,000. And fully loaded, it's going to be just over $65,000. So pretty darn narrow and significantly less expensive than a Tesla Model Y. Of course, keep in mind that General Motors has run out of federal tax credits. So while you might get a $7,500 tax credit on a Genesis or an Audi or a Mercedes or a BMW, you're not going to get one on this or on a Tesla. But I think that Cadillac has priced it really well, even keeping that in mind, because something like a BMW iX or the Audi e-tron, they're way, way, way more expensive. And that surprised me again because the interior in the Lyriq is honestly at the same level or above the interiors that we find in those competitive models. Cadillac has done an absolutely stellar job with this new interior, and I think the exterior styling of the Lyriq as well. Now for the bad news. If you want to get your hands on a Lyriq, all the 2023 models are accounted for. If you go onto the website and reserve one now, you're going to be reserving a 2024 model year vehicle, and we don't have pricing information on those. According to the website, the base version, the rear-wheel drive model, is going to start around $60,000, and the all-wheel drive model with dual motors is going to start around $64,000. And there do seem to be a few more options probably that are going to be available in 2024, but Cadillac has not said specifically. They also have not really given us any clear detail as to whether or not the 2024 all-wheel drive model will get the faster onboard charger that this rear-wheel drive model gets. But I wouldn't be surprised if that at least was a late model change in 2024, because the 19.2 kW charger really is a solid feature benefit for this over a lot of those other electric competitors. If you're charging at home, even if you're completely empty or you're charging at the office, and you have a compatible EVSE, this is going to gain range significantly faster than something like the Genesis or the BMW or the Mercedes, etc. Definitely faster as well than a Model Y. But on the DC fast charge side, things are a little bit quicker in some of the competition, most notably the Genesis vehicles and of course the Tesla lineup, because they peak faster than this DC fast charging wise. They appear to be a little bit more efficient. They have slightly smaller batteries, so you're not going to be putting as much energy into the battery, and the energy is going to be going in a little bit quicker. But bottom line, the Lyriq is incredibly impressive. I love the interior. It has a really solid ride to it. It's not firm and bouncy like a lot of modern EVs are. It's not cushy, plushy like you might expect an old Cadillac sedan to be, but I think that Cadillac found an excellent balance between those two worlds, and the style is definitely something that I like, but again, is really more of a personal preference. Do you like this sort of modern, aggressive, off-roady station wagon look, or would you prefer something that's a bit more traditionally boxy, or something that's even bolder and brasher, something like the Cadillac Escalade? Let me know down there in the comment section below, and let me know if you've pre-ordered one of these, because I'm really interested to see who's doing that and what exactly they're expecting in their Lyriq. As I said at the beginning of the video, the Lyriq is really showing us the direction for the entire Cadillac portfolio, and I have to say that direction appears to be very impressive. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section. If you want to know even more about the Lyriq, be sure and check out that video over at EV Buyer's Guide. I'll be sure and post a link down there in the description. There's also going to be a link right at the end of the video in the end screen. In the meantime, hit the subscribe button for this channel. Find me over at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those other places. And of course, you can check out the podcast at your favorite podcast platform. Just type in there Auto Buyer's Guide and you'll find me and Tim Mosso. I'll see all of you later.